Hey guys, how's it going? So, keeping up with the Christmas spirit, I was in a good mood today, and I was searching the ATF website, hoping that maybe, instead of just a dog calendar, see my previous video if you're not sure what I mean, that maybe they had a cat calendar, or something like that to spread the holiday cheer. Instead, I found this. This is a new letter of the ATF clarifying what the definition of a firearm is, and indeed clarifying that something that's not even a firearm at all, not by any statutory definition or by any common sense, also clarifying those as firearms in and of themselves. So this is something that was released today, which is December 27th, 2022. I thought the brace ban ruling was going to come down today. Maybe this explains why it didn't, because they had to get this urgent news release from the official ATF headquarters, otherwise known as the AFT. It's titled, ATF issues open letter to FFLs to clarify application of frame or receiver, final rule on certain semi-automatic pistol frames. So there was a rule that was put into effect this year that re-clarified what a frame or receiver would be, and this was concerning home-built firearms. I've talked about it on this channel. And after reading and understanding the rule, most people, or many people, thought that that meant that as long as it was just the piece of polymer, piece of plastic, whatever, and it didn't come with any jigs, templates, instructions, or tooling, it was not a firearm. Well, looks like they've gone through and supposedly re-clarified and changed their mind, or changed the interpretation of what people had, certainly. This says Washington. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives issued an open letter today to all federal firearms licensees regarding the application of Final Rule 2021-05F, definition of frame or receiver, and identification of firearms on partially complete Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and similar semi-automatic pistol frames. Note, they said partially complete, meaning they won't even house the pins to allow it to accept a fire control group and many other things. But it continues. In April 2022, the Department of Justice announced, and they put this right underlined there, bold for you to see, announced. Since when do bureaucracies just announce what a law is? Or how do they even have any authority or permission to talk about firearms at all? Considering the Second Amendment, which is supposed to be the supreme law of the land, says shall not be infringed, and that is an individual right, and it's not connected to militia service. But they announced a new frame or receiver final rule which modernizes the definition of a firearm. Modernizing the definitions. Listen to that. The final rule, which went into effect on August 2022, clarifies that parts kits that are readily convertible to firearms are subject to the same regulations as firearms made by a federal firearms licensed manufacturer. Today's open letter clarifies to the firearm industry and the public how the August 2022 final rule addresses partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional semi-automatic striker-fired pistol frames or parts kits manufactured, sold, or distributed by Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and others. They just said non-functional right there. Partially complete Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and similar striker-fired semi-automatic pistol frames, including but not limited to those sold within parts kits, are regulated by the Gun Control Act, GCA, because they have reached a stage of manufacture where they, quote, may readily be completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to a functional frame. That's not what the Gun Control Act says at all. And the Gun Control Act is unconstitutional too, by the way. This definition of, quote, readily applies to each classification of a partially complete frame or receiver under this rule, whether sold alone or as a parts kit. See, they keep moving the goalpost. It was the parts kits that they had a problem with. Then it was the templates. Then it was the jigs. Now it's just it could be sold alone. Therefore, even without any associated templates, jigs, molds, equipment, tools, instructions, guides, or marketing materials, These partially complete pistol frames are, quote, frames and firearms as defined in the GCA and its implementing regulations. So that's saying they'll have to be serialized, sold through FFLs, even though they're admitting that these are non-functional. These actually don't meet the definition of a firearm at all. They clearly lack the finished processes, the machining processes, to even house the parts that would be required for these to be firearms, in my opinion. And even in the unconstitutional GCA, it does not define things like this as a firearm. Now, the GCA is unconstitutional as it is, and it's disgusting that it's been allowed to stand up and exist. Even that is a law. Unconstitutional law, according to Marbury v. Madison. That law should be null and void, but it is a law for whatever that's worth. This is just the ATF, a bureaucracy, just coming up with, they're going to say, clarifications, modernizations of the definition of a firearm. And in my opinion, just acting like a fourth, unequal, unaccountable branch of government that is just writing these edicts and letters and making rules that have full force and effect of law while saying it's not technically a law, it's just a clarification of a law. They go on to talk about the purpose of why. So they grandstand for a minute here. Today's open letter is another important step in implementing the crucial public safety rule regarding privately made firearms, or ghost guns, said ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach. The partially completed pistol frames described in this open letter are readily convertible to functioning firearms under the Gun Control Act. Ghost guns can kill like other firearms if they are in the wrong hands, so they are treated as firearms under the law. This means that they must have serial numbers so that law enforcement can trace if they are used in crimes like other guns, and also that those engaged in the business of selling them must be licensed dealers and run background checks. And this is all going on while we've been finding out more and more about the illegal registry that the ATF's been holding with serialized firearms gathered from the 4473 form that I just did a video on, talking about the brand new ATF 4473 form and all of the potential traps and pitfalls and gotchas that are in there. All of this stuff's happening at the same time that there's a push for these universal background checks in many states and even federally. It concludes, if anyone remains unclear about a specific model or configuration, they may submit a request with a sample to ATF, who can only render a formal determination upon receipt of a formal request and physically examining a submitted sample. ATF regulates the firearms industry and is the lead federal law enforcement agency with jurisdiction involving firearms and violent crime. For more information about ATF and its programs is available on www.atf.gov. And you tell me what you think in the comments, but it appears to me they're not only law enforcement, but they write new law, rules, clarifications that have full force and effect of law. So what's the difference? Then they act as a judicial branch and they judge their own rulings, whether they're constitutional or not. They always judge their rulings as being okay. They publish them and then they enforce the law. So I look at this agency as executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch all in one, which would be impossible under the Constitution of the United States, but is becoming quite prevalent and overwhelming in whatever it is that we're living in here in America now. Alright guys, thanks for watching and have a good one.